The thick gray smoke curled lazily from the castle's highest chimneys, a constant plume against the perpetually overcast medieval sky. Within those formidable stone walls, shielded from the biting winds and the creeping damp, lay the heart of the household, the kitchens. These were not merely utilitarian spaces for preparing food. They were roaring furnaces, vital organs that pumped heat and sustenance through the entire fortress. To master the art of feeding hundreds in a cold stone edifice was to master the very forces of fire and air, a monumental task that shaped daily life. The constant battle against cold and damp meant that every architectural choice, every daily chore, revolved around generating and conserving warmth. The medieval castle kitchen was a testament to ingenious pragmatism, where the raw power of fire was meticulously harnessed to serve both sustenance and comfort. The sheer scale of the operation demanded immense resources and constant vigilance, making the kitchen one of the most dynamic and challenging environments within the entire stronghold. From the preparation of lavish feasts to the simple daily bread, fire was the indispensable element, its management a specialized skill. Watch until the end and you'll discover the true cost, measured in sweat, pain, and lives, behind the simple act of building a roof over one's head in medieval England. Beyond the roaring visible flames of the main hearth, many medieval castle kitchens concealed a less obvious, yet remarkably efficient heating mechanism: the ash pit. This was not merely a convenient receptacle for spent embers and residual ash, a simple discard point. It was often a specially constructed, deep cavity designed with intent, typically located directly beneath the main cooking hearth, sometimes even extending downwards into the very bedrock or foundations of the kitchen floor itself. The precise design of these pits varied from castle to castle, influenced by local building practices and available materials, but they invariably involved a robust, heat-resistant lining of quarried stone or durable brickwork, ensuring both structural integrity against constant thermal stress and the crucial support for the colossal weight of the hearth above. As wood was consumed on the main cooking surface, a portion of the glowing embers and fine smoldering ash would fall naturally through robust iron grates set into the hearth base, or more often, would be deliberately and systematically raked into this subterranean chamber by vigilant kitchen staff. This process was far from haphazard. Skilled kitchen personnel understood the importance of maintaining a steady, consistent supply of embers within the pit to keep it actively engaged in its warming function. Here within this insulated subterranean chamber, shielded by the surrounding earth and the immense, thick stone construction of the castle's foundations, the embers would continue to smolder and oxidize slowly for extended periods, sometimes for an entire night or even for several days, radiating a consistent low-level heat upwards. This pervasive, almost invisible warmth would permeate through the stone flagging of the kitchen floor, providing an invaluable underfoot warmth that was particularly appreciated during the long, bone-chilling medieval nights when the main cooking fires might have been banked low or even allowed to die down to conserve precious fuel. The ash pit effectively functioned as a rudimentary hypocaust system, strikingly similar in principle to the sophisticated underfloor heating systems employed by the Romans, but powered entirely by the residual heat generated by the kitchen's primary fuel source, thus ingeniously repurposing what would otherwise be considered mere waste heat. The slow, controlled combustion within the pit meant a minimal demand for oxygen, allowing the embers to glow persistently for hours with little to no active intervention or attention from the staff. This constant, slow combustion of these embers also served a vital secondary purpose: to thoroughly dry the kitchen floor and the immediate surrounding masonry, actively combating the inherent dampness and perpetual chill of stone construction that otherwise promoted the growth of mold, mildew, and general unpleasantness. A dry floor was not only significantly more hygienic for the preparation and handling of foodstuffs, but also considerably less slippery and generally more comfortable for the busy, often barefoot or thinly shod kitchen staff to work upon. The subtle warmth emanating upwards from the floor would also gently heat the ambient air, contributing to a more stable and tolerable internal environment within the vast kitchen space. While any direct gaseous fumes from the smoldering embers were typically minimal and would usually be drawn into the main chimney system via an integrated flue, The primary and most significant benefit derived from the ash pit was undeniably the radiated heat. This ingenious system effectively transformed a simple waste disposal method into an active, integral component of the castle's broader thermal management strategy. This clever recycling and repurposing of thermal energy from what would otherwise be a discarded byproduct speaks volumes about the medieval emphasis on resourcefulness, efficiency, and their empirical, if unscientific, understanding of heat transfer dynamics. Very curious to know your thoughts on this. What do you think about the ingenious use of ash pits for radiant heating? And does it surprise you that such concepts, reminiscent of ancient technologies, existed in the medieval period? Let us know in the comments below. At the very core of the medieval castle kitchen stood the open hearth, a colossal, roaring entity that dominated the space. Unlike the contained fireboxes of later periods, which became more common in Renaissance and early modern kitchens, these medieval hearths were vast, open recesses in the stone walls. They were often several meters wide and deep, sometimes even spanning an entire wall of the kitchen, creating an impressive spectacle of fire. This immense scale was not merely for show, it allowed for multiple culinary activities to occur simultaneously, a fundamental necessity for feeding a large castle population that could number in the hundreds, from the lord and his family to the numerous servants, soldiers, and guests. Logs, sometimes as thick as a man's torso and weighing a considerable amount, were piled high, meticulously arranged by experienced kitchen staff to create an immense bonfire. This provided both intense, direct heat for cooking and a significant source of ambient warmth for the entire kitchen staff, who labored tirelessly within its confines. The floor of the hearth itself was typically a thick slab of heat-resistant stone, often locally quarried granite or sandstone, or densely packed refractory earth. This material was capable of withstanding constant extreme temperatures without cracking, disintegrating, or transferring excessive heat to the underlying foundations. Its surface was often slightly sloped toward the front, allowing for easier raking of embers and ash into the dedicated ash pits. Above this inferno, intricate systems of hooks, chains, and adjustable pot hangers were suspended from robust iron bars embedded securely in the masonry of the hearth's hood, or from central gallows-like structures that spanned the width of the fireplace. These adjustable mechanisms were ingenious in their simplicity, allowing various cooking vessels, from immense iron or bronze cauldrons capable of boiling vast quantities of stews, pottages, and gruels, to smaller, more specialized pots for delicate sauces, gravies, or warming liquids, to be precisely positioned at different heights above the flames. This precise vertical adjustment was crucial for controlling the intensity of the heat applied to each dish, a rudimentary yet highly effective form of temperature control. This adaptability was paramount, as medieval recipes often required long, slow simmering for hours to tenderize tough meats and meld flavors, followed by rapid, intense boiling or even rudimentary deep frying for other preparations. The most prominent feature, however, and often the visual centerpiece of the hearth, was the roasting spit. These long, sturdy iron rods, sometimes several meters in length, were designed to hold and slowly rotate large cuts of meat, from entire pigs, lambs, and even smaller deer, to multiple fowls like geese and chickens, directly over the open flames. While some smaller spits could be turned manually by a designated turnspit servant, a hot and monotonous job, larger operations might employ more sophisticated mechanical turnspits. These could be powered by water wheels positioned outside the kitchen, or even by specialized turnspit dogs, often a breed like the now extinct turnspit dog, running in a wheel connected to the spit by a chain mechanism. The continuous, slow rotation ensured even cooking, preventing one side from burning while the other remained raw, and allowed the fats and juices to baste the meat naturally, enhancing flavor and tenderness. The sheer scale of the hearth and the constant burning of enormous quantities of wood meant that the kitchen was perpetually warm, often uncomfortably so for those working directly by the flames, particularly in the summer months. This often required frequent breaks for the staff and constant replenishment of water to stay hydrated. This continuous radiating heat permeated the heavy stone walls of the kitchen, making it a significant thermal anchor for the entire castle, a beacon of warmth against the pervasive cold and damp of other, less actively heated chambers, particularly during the long, harsh winter months. A remarkable, often integrated feature of some medieval castle kitchens was the direct connection to a smokehouse, transforming the kitchen's heat and smoke into a dual-purpose system for both warming and, crucially, food preservation. In castles where large quantities of meat, fish, or even cheese needed to be preserved for extended periods without spoilage, a dedicated smokehouse was an absolute necessity. Rather than constructing a separate, inefficient fire within the smokehouse itself, which would require additional fuel, labor, and maintenance, some ingenious castle designs channeled the smoke and residual heat directly from the main kitchen hearths into the smokehouse chamber. This was achieved through cleverly constructed flues, often built directly into the thick stone walls of the kitchen, or dedicated openings in the main chimney system that could be regulated with simple dampers or shutters. The smoke, laden with natural preservatives like phenols and creosols, and emanating from the constantly burning, robust kitchen fires, would slowly permeate the foodstuffs hung within the smokehouse, curing them for long-term storage. This process not only preserved the food by inhibiting microbial growth and oxidation, but also imparted distinct flavors highly valued in the medieval diet. This symbiotic relationship meant that the intense heat generated in the kitchen, primarily for cooking, served a vital secondary function, significantly reducing the overall demand for additional fuel and the arduous labor associated with maintaining a separate fire. The smokehouse, therefore, became an integral extension of the kitchen's thermal influence, absorbing and retaining some of the heat that would otherwise simply dissipate into the atmosphere. Furthermore, the very act of smoking, which typically occurs at a low, consistent temperature, often between 80 to 80 degrees for cold smoking, meant that the smokehouse itself would maintain a slightly elevated, stable temperature. This subtle warmth was crucial for preventing freezing of the foodstuffs in colder months and actively aiding in the curing process by facilitating the penetration of smoke compounds. This integration speaks to a profound understanding of efficiency and resource maximization in a period where every resource was precious and waste was intolerable. It illustrates how seemingly distinct functions within the castle were often interconnected and interdependent, leveraging the thermal output of one area to benefit another, thereby creating a more cohesive, sustainable, and remarkably self-sufficient system for the entire castle community. The lingering, pungent scent of wood smoke throughout the kitchen and adjacent areas was not just a byproduct of daily cooking, but a deliberate, almost fragrant element of the castle's vital larder management. The relentless demand for heat in the medieval castle kitchen presented a colossal logistical challenge: fuel consumption. Wood was the predominant fuel source, and the sheer quantities required to maintain the roaring hearths and hot ovens were astronomical. A large castle, housing perhaps hundreds of people, could consume many cords of wood daily during the colder months, a volume that could easily amount to several tons. This was not merely a matter of cutting down a few trees from a nearby copse. It necessitated extensive and systematic forest management on a grand scale. Woodlands within the castle's domain or controlled territories were meticulously managed, almost like agricultural fields, with specific areas designated for sustainable harvesting. Techniques like coppicing, a method of cutting trees to ground level to stimulate new, vigorous growth from the stump, and pollarding were widely practiced, ensuring a renewable and consistent supply of timber. Without such foresight, the castle would quickly deplete its local resources, leading to immense logistical difficulties and potential vulnerability. The cutting, splitting, and transporting of this enormous volume of timber was a constant, arduous task for a significant portion of the castle's labor force, especially during the crucial autumn and early winter months when wood had to be gathered and seasoned before the deepest cold set in. Teams of woodcutters, often peasants performing feudal labor services as part of their obligations to the lord, would spend weeks toiling in the forests, felling mature trees with handsaws and axes. Others were employed specifically to split the heavy, unwieldy logs into manageable sizes suitable for the various hearths and ovens, a task requiring considerable strength and specialized tools like wedges and mauls. The sheer scale of the operation meant that the sound of chopping wood was a common backdrop to life on the castle estate. The transport of these vast quantities of wood from the forest to the castle could involve numerous carts pulled by sturdy oxen or horses, a slow and cumbersome process, particularly if the forests were distant or the terrain was difficult and muddy. Entire sections of castle outbuildings were often dedicated to wood storage. Vast, well-ventilated sheds specifically designed to keep the fuel dry and protected from the damp and rain, as damp wood burned inefficiently, produced excessive smoke, and imparted unpleasant flavors to food. The constant, insatiable need for fuel underscored the castle's deep reliance on its surrounding lands and the tireless labor of its people, a perpetual cycle of harvesting and consumption that drove much of the medieval economy and dictated a significant portion of the daily routine for both lord and peasant. This massive logistical undertaking highlights the profound interconnectedness of the castle with its environment and its workforce. Coming up, their surprisingly creative solution to the biggest daily obstacle they faced, beyond simply keeping warm. The placement of the kitchen within the sprawling castle structure was rarely arbitrary. It was a deliberate strategic decision aimed not only at operational efficiency and practical considerations like waste disposal, but also, crucially, at maximizing the distribution of heat throughout the often chilly stone edifice. While security, minimizing fire risk to other parts of the castle, and convenient access to a water source, well, or cistern, were certainly primary considerations, the immense thermal output of the kitchen was an equally powerful, undeniable factor that influenced its architectural integration. Large castle kitchens were frequently situated in the lower levels of the main keep or within a dedicated service wing, often at ground level or even partially subterranean. This foundational placement offered several distinct advantages. Firstly, it allowed for far easier and less strenuous delivery of heavy fuel supplies like logs and cumbersome food provisions, minimizing the arduous task of hauling goods up multiple flights of narrow winding stairs, which would have been a daily logistical nightmare. More importantly, from a heating perspective, the fundamental principle that heat rises was intuitively understood and exploited. Positioning the main heat source at the lowest practical point meant that the vast quantities of warm air generated by the massive fires and ovens would naturally permeate upwards through the castle's various levels. Stairwells, internal courtyards, and main corridors acted as natural conduits, effectively drawing the warm air from the kitchen and gradually distributing it into the upper halls and chambers, providing a subtle but significant degree of ambient warmth to rooms that otherwise relied on individual, less efficient and fuel-intensive braziers or small fireplaces. Furthermore, kitchens were often deliberately located adjacent to or directly beneath major communal areas, such as the Great Hall, which served as the primary gathering space for meals, feasts, judicial proceedings, and daily communal life. This direct proximity meant that the substantial heat radiating through the thick stone walls of the kitchen directly warmed the Great Hall, making it a considerably more comfortable and hospitable space for its inhabitants and visitors. The sheer thermal mass of the heavy stone walls separating the kitchen from these adjacent, often grander rooms meant that they would slowly absorb and then consistently re-radiate heat for hours, effectively becoming giant, passive radiators. This effect was especially noticeable after a large fire had been burning for much of the day. In some more advanced or larger castles, rudimentary forms of central heating might have been experimented with, such as specialized flues or warmed air ducts, remnants of Roman hypocaust, integrated into the design to channel heat more directly and efficiently into specific, important chambers, like the Lord's private apartments or the chapel. This thoughtful and integrated placement effectively turned the kitchen into a central heating plant for the entire fortress, albeit one entirely dependent on the constant tending of roaring open flames and the continuous manual replenishment of fuel, transforming what could have been a purely functional and isolated space into a vital thermal hub that contributed significantly to the overall livability of the castle. Beyond the direct intense heat emanating from the central hearth and colossal ovens, the scullery, often an ancillary area within or directly adjacent to the main kitchen, contributed a subtle yet significant amount of secondary heat through its constant production of steam and the continuous presence of hot water. The scullery was the designated zone where the arduous tasks of washing, rinsing, and general cleaning of cooking utensils, wooden trenchers, serving dishes, and storage containers took place. This tireless work involved immense quantities of hot water, which were not simply drawn from a tap. They had to be laboriously heated in large iron or copper cauldrons, perpetually simmering over smaller, dedicated fires, or directly over the residual heat and embers of the main hearth, strategically positioned for this purpose. The sight and sound of these massive vats bubbling and steaming were constant features of the scullery. The constant bubbling and steaming of these large vats of water released substantial amounts of water vapor and latent heat into the air, permeating the immediate environment. While perhaps not as intense or as outwardly visible as the direct heat radiating from the roaring flames of the primary cooking fires, this pervasive, moist warmth permeated the immediate area, gradually raising the ambient temperature of the scullery and, by extension, parts of the main kitchen. This humidity also played a crucial role in combating the inherent dampness and chill that characterize stone buildings, preventing the clammy cold that could otherwise settle into masonry. The humid air, though sometimes making the atmosphere thick and warm, also had a minor but practical benefit. It helped prevent the rapid drying and cracking of wooden utensils and equipment, extending their lifespan in a time when tools were precious and difficult to replace. The large volumes of hot water produced were not exclusively for washing. They were also vital for numerous preparatory tasks. This included parboiling vegetables to soften them before further cooking, scalding poultry to facilitate feather removal, and other processes that required a consistent, readily available supply of heat beyond the immediate stovetop. The entire logistical chain, from the act of drawing heavy buckets of water from wells or cisterns, to the laborious process of heating it over a fire, and then finally using it in various culinary and cleaning processes, created a distinct microclimate of warmth and humidity within the scullery. This warmth then extended through open doorways and the natural flow of air into the main kitchen. This constant background heat helped to keep the kitchen complex at a more stable, elevated temperature, significantly reducing the drastic dips in warmth that would occur if heat sources were only intermittent or solely focused on direct cooking. The scullery, therefore, functioned as a kind of supplementary radiant heater, its moist warmth subtly seeping into the surrounding stone and air, contributing significantly to the overall thermal comfort of the castle's culinary heart, making it a less punishing environment for the tireless staff. Coming up, their surprisingly creative solution to the biggest daily obstacle they faced, beyond simply keeping warm. The constant, vigorous human activity within the medieval castle kitchen itself generated a surprising, yet often overlooked, amount of metabolic heat, directly adding to the overall warmth of the space. A bustling medieval kitchen was never a quiet or still place. It was a hive of intense, unrelenting physical labor from dawn until late into the night. Cooks, scullions, turnspits, bakers, porters, and various assistants were in perpetual motion, their bodies constantly expending energy. This involved immensely strenuous tasks, lifting heavy iron cauldrons brimming with boiling liquids, meticulously chopping and dicing vast quantities of ingredients on wooden blocks, rhythmically kneading large batches of dough, stirring immense pots for hours, and the physically demanding work of turning spits laden with roasting meat. This sustained physical exertion, from the simple, repetitive act of carrying heavy sacks of flour or barrels of ale across the stone floor, to the more strenuous work of butchering a freshly delivered carcass, significantly raised the body temperature of the individuals performing these tasks. Each person, through their basic metabolic processes and continuous muscle activity, became a small, living radiator, emitting heat into the surrounding atmosphere. When dozens of individuals were engaged in such demanding work simultaneously within a relatively confined space, even one as large as a castle kitchen, the collective body heat produced was considerable, forming a palpable layer of warmth. Moreover, the sheer density of activity meant that the kitchen was rarely a static or stagnant environment. There was a constant flow of people moving between workstations, the clatter of equipment, and the transport of foodstuffs, all contributing to the thermal mass and movement of air within the room. This pervasive human presence, coupled with the radiant heat from the open flames, hot surfaces, and steaming vessels, meant that the kitchen, despite its often drafty nature due to the large openings and high ceilings, rarely felt truly cold. For the medieval kitchen staff, the intense heat was not merely an external environmental factor that they endured. It was an inherent, unavoidable byproduct of their continuous, demanding physical labor. In a cold, damp stone castle where many other rooms, including the living quarters of lesser servants, might be frigid and unheated for much of the day, the kitchen offered a stark and welcome contrast, a testament to the combined thermal output of roaring fires and tireless human effort. The very essence of cooking and food preparation involves sustained physical input, making the staff themselves an integral, if often overlooked, component of the castle's dynamic heating system. The very construction of the medieval castle kitchen, primarily from thick, dense stone, contributed significantly to its ability to retain and distribute heat, effectively functioning as an enormous thermal mass radiator. Unlike lighter, modern building materials that heat up and cool down quickly, stone possesses a remarkably high specific heat capacity and relatively good thermal conductivity. This inherent property means it can absorb a vast amount of heat energy from the surrounding environment and then slowly, consistently release that stored warmth over extended periods, acting like a massive, slow-release heating element. When the immense fires in the hearth roared throughout the day, fueled by copious amounts of timber, the surrounding stone walls, the flagstone floor, and even the vaulted ceilings of the kitchen would gradually absorb this intense heat. The process was not instantaneous. It took many hours for the heat to penetrate and saturate the thick masonry, often several feet deep. However, once the stone was thoroughly warmed, it acted as a colossal thermal battery, steadily radiating a gentle, pervasive warmth back into the room. This warmth also diffused outwards, permeating into adjacent chambers and passages, long after the fires had dwindled to embers or even been extinguished for the night. This passive heat contribution was a crucial element in maintaining a degree of comfort within the otherwise cold and drafty castle. This inherent property of stone meant that the kitchen's internal temperature fluctuated less dramatically than it would have in a structure built with less dense materials like wood or wattle and daub. It effectively smoothed out the temperature peaks and troughs, providing a more stable and consistently comfortable environment for the kitchen staff, who spent countless hours working amidst the heat and steam. Even on bitterly cold medieval nights, when the external temperatures plummeted well below freezing, the residual heat stored within the kitchen's massive stone structure would prevent the interior temperature from plummeting to the same freezing levels as other, less actively heated parts of the castle. The thick walls, often several feet deep and constructed from locally quarried stone, were not merely structural supports bearing the immense weight of the castle. They were active, integral components of the heating system itself. They absorbed the thermal energy generated by the fires and actively re-emitted it, providing a continuous, albeit subtle, warmth. This passive heating effect was absolutely crucial in medieval castles, where active heating sources, like individual fireplaces or braziers, were limited to a few privileged rooms, and fuel was an extremely precious commodity requiring vast logistical effort to acquire. The kitchen, therefore, was not just a place where fire burned and food was prepared. It was a structure specifically designed, perhaps intuitively rather than by scientific calculation, to capture, store, and redistribute that invaluable thermal energy through its very fabric, a powerful testament to an intuitive understanding of building physics and the efficient use of available materials. The immense amount of waste heat inevitably generated by the constant, large-scale operations within the medieval castle kitchen was not merely allowed to dissipate haphazardly into the atmosphere. It was often cleverly, if somewhat inadvertently, harnessed to provide a significant degree of warmth to other, often more important, communal areas of the castle, particularly the Great Hall. As previously discussed, castle kitchens were frequently positioned in close proximity to or directly beneath the Great Hall. This strategic architectural proximity was a key factor in leveraging the kitchen's thermal output. It meant that the substantial heat radiating from the kitchen's thick stone walls, coupled with the warm air escaping from the large hearth opening and even the main kitchen door, would naturally spill and circulate into the Great Hall. The Great Hall, being the primary communal space for dining, banquets, entertainment, and official business, required some degree of warmth to make it habitable and comfortable for the Lord, his family, and guests, especially during the colder months when large gatherings were common indoors. While the Great Hall itself would invariably possess its own substantial fireplace, often a grand and decorative focal point, the constant, powerful thermal output of the adjacent or underlying kitchen served as a crucial supplementary heating source. The pervasive warmth emanating from the kitchen would effectively temper the pervasive chill in the Great Hall, making it significantly more bearable for its many occupants, particularly during extended evening gatherings. Furthermore, the very acts of transporting vast quantities of hot food from the kitchen to the Great Hall, with steaming dishes, heated platters, and even the bodies of the servants carrying them, would also contribute fleeting but noticeable bursts of warmth and moisture to the air. The overall design of the castle often incorporated strategically placed doorways, archways, and passages that facilitated this natural heat transfer, allowing the warmer kitchen air to circulate into the larger, grander space of the Great Hall. This passive system was not always a deliberate, meticulously engineered heating network in the modern sense, but rather a highly beneficial byproduct of practical architectural placement and the sheer consistent volume of heat produced by the kitchen's continuous operation. The kitchen, therefore, acted as a kind of informal, central heating unit for the castle. Its constant warmth, a silent but invaluable partner in making the Great Hall a more hospitable and livable environment for the castle's inhabitants and visitors, particularly during the long, dark, and often bitterly cold winter evenings, when social life largely retreated indoors. At the very heart of the kitchen's multifaceted heating efficiency lay the master cook's expertise in the intricate art of managing fire and warmth. This was not a skill that could be learned from a book. It was a craft refined through countless years of intense practical experience, observation, and an intimate, almost visceral knowledge of the hearth itself. Their role was far more complex than simply lighting wood for cooking. It involved a profound understanding of different types of wood, each with its unique burning properties. Some, like oak, burned long and hot, ideal for sustained roasting, while others, like birch, provided a quicker, fiercer heat for rapid boiling. A truly skilled cook knew precisely how to lay a fire to achieve a slow, smoldering heat that could last for hours, perfect for gentle simmering or maintaining warmth in the ash pit. Conversely, they also knew how to build it up quickly for a burst of intense roasting heat, capable of searing large cuts of meat to perfection. This granular control over temperature was critical for the diverse range of medieval culinary techniques. They inherently understood the paramount importance of dry, seasoned wood, knowing instinctively that damp wood produced far less heat, consumed valuable fuel inefficiently, and generated excessive, acrid smoke that would choke the kitchen and taint the food. The master cook possessed an acute awareness of how to manipulate the airflow through the massive hearth. This involves subtle adjustments, such as repositioning logs to allow more oxygen to reach the flames, strategically opening or closing kitchen doors to create a gentle draft, or even understanding the subtle effects of external wind direction on the chimney's draw, knowing how a strong gale could either fan the flames or cause dangerous backdrafts. This constant, intuitive calibration of the fire was a continuous process throughout the day. Beyond the immediate culinary needs of cooking specific dishes, the master cook often bore the overarching responsibility for the entire fuel supply and its judicious utilization. This meant ensuring that wood was used with utmost efficiency, minimizing waste, and that valuable heat generated by the immense fires was not squandered. This might involve the foresightful practice of banking the fires at night, meticulously covering glowing embers with ash to preserve them, thereby allowing for quick and effortless reignition in the morning without the need for fresh tinder and kindling. They also constantly adjusted the fire size and intensity based on the day's projected cooking demands, a small, simmering fire for simple daily meals, and a roaring inferno for grand feasts. Their intuitive grasp of thermal dynamics honed by constant, direct interaction with the roaring flames and radiating surfaces, allowed them to maintain a consistent, workable temperature within the kitchen. This was crucial not only for optimal cooking results, but also for the relative comfort and productivity of their dedicated staff. This vast practical knowledge, a precious inheritance passed down from generation to generation of seasoned kitchen professionals, was essentially an unwritten manual on how to harness and control one of the most fundamental forces of nature for the survival and comfort of the castle's entire inhabitants. The master cook was, therefore, far more than just a culinary artist. They were a vital engineer of warmth, a logistical mastermind, and a practical physicist whose skill directly impacted the livability and daily function of the entire fortress. Their ability to manage fire was a cornerstone of medieval castle life. Reflecting on the monumental effort and ingenious solutions employed to heat medieval castle kitchens reveals a profound respect for resources and an innate understanding of physics. The sheer scale of their daily operations, powered by immense fires and sustained by constant human labor, paints a vivid picture of a world where warmth was a hard-won luxury, not an assured commodity. From the strategic placement of their massive hearths to the clever recycling of waste heat, every element of the medieval kitchen's design and function contributed to keeping the chill at bay. It makes one appreciate the simple flick of a switch in modern homes. What aspects of medieval castle life do you find most fascinating? Or what other historical topics would you like to see explored in future videos? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more historical deep dives and fascinating insights into the past.